Today we're updating the legendary investment tier list, where we review every legendary commander in Rise of Kingdoms and talk about which ones free-to-play players and open fielders should invest in to make the absolute best value they possibly can for their account. And we're doing an update today to include Herman Prime and Ashurbanipal. Now that we know their full kits, I've got some thoughts on who should be investing in them and who probably should pump the brakes and focus on other stuff. But before I dive into the list, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's video. Today's video is sponsored by the Huawei App Gallery, and they've got some crazy deals on a city building war game that takes place in the most unlikely of places, that's underground. The game is called The Ants Underground Kingdom, and this is a city building war game, except instead of building a city where you're training infantry, archers, and cavalry, you're training and building a colony of ants that wages war against other colonies. So you build your colony underground, and when you're ready, you take it above ground and bring the fight to other colonies. In fact, you even hatch special ants to lead your armies into battle. And for this game, there are some really amazing discounts that you can get by using the link in the description of this video. The way this works is that you'll first download the Huawei App Gallery as explained on the site linked in the description. From there, you download the Ants Underground Kingdom from the Huawei App Gallery. Then you make your purchases through the app, through the Huawei App Gallery, and you can get a bunch of discounts as you go. There's even something you can claim that's going to give you a bunch of free resources and speed ups in game. So what are you waiting for? If you want to check out the Ants Underground Kingdom, do so using my link in the description and via the Huawei App Gallery so you can save a bunch of money on packs that you purchase. This does expire on December 31st. 2023. Thank you again to the Huawei App Gallery and the Ants Underground Kingdom for sponsoring today's video. All right, let's get things rolling and quickly review what each of these categories mean, because I think people sometimes get a little bit confused. This list is designed to help you understand which commanders are a good investment. When I say a commander is a good investment, that is my prediction that for a long time, you will use them in the open field and they will be better than other places you could have put your sculptures. Investment quality is about putting your sculptures somewhere and getting value literally for years, ideally. We saw this with commanders like, for example, Guan Yu and Yi Song. So I try to spot which commanders these are. Now, all the way at the very top of the list, we have the top priority. If you're wondering what commander do I work on right now in Rise of Kingdoms, Chisgule, I'd say, well, are you working on infantry, archers, or cavalry? And then look in top priority and pick the associated commander. All of those commanders are amazing. These are sort of sorted by priority from left to right, but all of those commanders are top tier. I would say Zhuge Liang is probably one of the best commanders in the game, but that's topic for a separate video. From there, we have low priority. Now, look, it always drives me crazy when people say, everything should be a top priority. Like, you can only have a small number of top priority things. I worked in a professional environment where you had to prioritize stuff. I worked on technology, and you'd often have to sit down with your, business partners and say, what's your number one priority? They say everything's important. Everything can't be important. You have to pick and choose. So I narrow things down. Top priority is what you do first. Low priority is what you do after you have finished top priority. Only after you finish top priority do I think you should look at that low priority row. The only exception would be if you'd say, I really need another cavalry commander, and I've already done the ones that are in top priority. Like, all right, jump on down to low priority at that point, okay? From here, we've got before Season of Conquest only. If you're in KVK Season 1 or Season 2, those are the only two commanders that I think you should deploy a lot of sculptures if you're free to play or low spend. Obviously, if you are spending lots of money in the game, you have more options like Alexander the Great and so on. We'll talk about that. Right now, some of those commanders are in the niche role category. This is for people who really know what they're doing. If you know what you're doing, yeah, pick niche role. Like, if you're a rally lead, even though this list is oriented towards more free-to-play, low spend open fielders, if you're a rally lead, like, yeah, you would work on Justinian, obviously. If you want to rally calves, he's freaking strong as can be. Henry has historically been a commander where, like, yeah, if you're going to rally archers, like, you know what you're doing? Okay, work on Henry, right? Like, Gilgamesh counters healing and like is like strangely effective against, you know, the Gorgo situation we got going on right now. Like, all right, like cool. Like, yeah, if you know what you're doing, work on these commanders. Otherwise, you should stick to top priority, low priority. The just no category are commanders that have tragically fallen off a cliff in terms of value, and I do not think they are a good investment anymore. I'm not saying they're bad right now. Trajan is amazing right now. I mean, he's really good, okay? Some of these commanders are actually really exceptional right now, but they're a bad investment, and we'll talk about what some of those reasons are. The point, though, is that when I say put your sculptures here, my hope is that you'll use that commander for that role in the field for a long time. Now, free commanders are obviously the ones that you work on for free over time. As much as possible, you want your gold keys to be the signal of progress toward these, you know, legendary commanders, but in some cases in the early game, like for example, Mehmed, you got to drop a few sculptures in there to get him to a good spot and start using him like, all right, like I understand. Charles Martel, if you put a few sculptures in there, like, all right, I understand. Do I think that it is good to be using your legendary commander sculptures in the early game before KVK Season 3 on these commanders? Not particularly, but if you need to do a few, fine. I wouldn't chase them to expertise. As a free-to-play low spend, definitely not. And that brings us to the two new commanders. Where the heck do they go? To be honest, I'm about to do something really crazy. I feel like I haven't done something this crazy in a long time. I'm going to take Hermann Prime. I'm going to swing him all the way up to the top. And not only am I going to put him all the way up in the top, I'm going to make the claim that he's better than Skippy Prime. I'm going to make the claim that he's better than Nevsky. And I'm going to make the claim that these guys are so powerful and the power level of new commanders is so high. And in order to enable you to focus on a smaller number of commanders, I'm going to take Skippy Prime and bump him down, and I'm going to take Nevsky and I'm going to bump him down. And I know that sounds really crazy, but let me just remind you what Hermann Prime does real quick. 2,000 damage factor, 3 targets, applies poison, a bunch of attack, a bunch of defense, a bunch of march speed. He also, whenever he uses an active skill, inflicts a defense reduction on the enemy. Plus, he gives 20% area of effect skill damage. Plus, he has instant proc damage. Plus, he takes less damage from targets that are poisoned. Plus, his instant proc damage poisons targets. Plus, when you awaken him or expertise him, he is going to get extra activations of his active skill. Hello? Like, he's insane. The power level of Hermann Prime is actually really high. I think he's really good. This is an aggressive take, given that we haven't even tested him yet, but this is you can either heed what I think these potential future situation might sort of look like with these commanders, or I don't know, man. I actually think archers are just looking insane right now. On the topic of archers looking insane, that's just Hermann Prime. You do realize we're not done yet. How about Ashurbanipal? Now, Ashurbanipal is really weird. We know that he's basically Nebu 2.0. So if I like put him where Nebu is, we know he's at least better than Nebu. He does 1,500 damage factor and 1,000 extra damage to the main target. Meanwhile, Nebu does 1,500 damage factor, 5 targets, just the same. But you have to get the expertise skill to get an extra 500 damage factor to the main target. Now, I do think the rest of Nebu's kit is actually really good. He doesn't have anything conditional on his second skill. He actually, on his 4th skill, gives you 15% damage and has a rage reduction. Very, very strong. Ashurbanipal has the downside of losing the defense boost and the march speed boost if you're on your own territory. That kind of sucks. In addition, his 3rd and 4th skill kind of do almost nothing. If you're open fielding, I don't know, it's like 20% skill damage and like 15% less normal attack damage taken. He is in a really weird spot. Like, I don't know where to put him. I would say I would continue to bump him up above Boudica Prime. I think he's going to be better than Boudica Prime because, like, the raw damage is insane. Like, while I love that Boudica does the 35% skill damage taken debuff, at the same time, like, what are we even talking about? 2,300 damage factor versus 2,500 damage factor to the main target and 1,500 damage factor to 4 other targets. Like, hello? So I think Ashurbanipal he's up there. And then the question is, well, is he so far up there that we actually move him into low priority? And like, I'm being aggressive with Herman by putting him in top priority, but I think I want to be maybe a little more passive. Maybe we wait till we see the testing for open fielding with Ashurbanipal. I think he could potentially go here pretty comfortably. Do I just leave him there and be aggressive? F it. Let's just be aggressive with our archers, all right? I think these new archers look really good. They look really, really powerful. And there's no two ways around it. Like, they're going to change things up. I, in some ways, hope I'm wrong, but let's just remember here, Herman Prime is doing fat AoE damage, 2000 factor, multiple targets. I talked about all the stuff he does, right? Well, Nevsky's just a single target damage dealer. I'm like, yeah, he's very, very good, but like, guys, like, at some point, the single target damage isn't enough compared to the full kit on the Herman Prime. And with Skippy Prime, what a weird situation to bump him down too. But let's just talk about this for a second. So Herman Prime and Skippy Prime are actually roughly equivalent, I would say, kind of right up until you get to the expertise skill. You've got Skippy Prime giving 10% skill damage. Cool. And 30% rage when your target is silenced. But a lot of people are now no longer using Guan Yu. So do you even have anything silenced to hit? So, like, weirdly enough, Skippy Prime is dropping off in value in part because his counterpart here, Guan Yu, is also dropping off in value. And, like, it just is what it is. I think that's where we're at, man. Meanwhile, Herman Prime is getting an extra activation of his active skill. Hello? What are we even talking about here? What are we comparing? Like, that is so good. And I've covered that in the Herman Prime video. I won't go and rehash that all here. So I weirdly enough think this is where the new view of the world is when Herman Prime gets here. Now, I'm going to do full testing and we'll see. But we're not done yet because some other things need to get rearranged. And there's a couple things we have to talk about. First of all, as a reminder, Cavalry are still busted in the Osiris Grand Prix, best of the best in the literal world, I think, duking it out. They're using 4 cavalry marches, including Trajan Ethel as a cavalry march. Technically Ethel Trajan, but whatever. So cavalry are busted. We know this. Second of all, since the last time I did this list, we got all this information about more skill damage commanders. I had made a bunch of assumptions that, like, Smite was the way that all the new commanders might go. No, actually, we're getting skill damage again. This means good news for all of you who have Boudica Prime and also Sargon the Great, that his skill damage taken debuff, her skill damage taken debuff, they are more relevant. I'm not going to put them back into low priority. We leave them where they are, but I think it's good news. We need to account for that in this list. Also, I just want to get more aggressive. So let's just get more aggressive here. There's a couple things we have to talk about. First of all, look, KVK2 and KVK1, as fun as they are, I don't think this list, which is oriented toward free-to-play low spenders, I don't think those players, even if they know what they're doing, should do Alexander the Great. I don't think you should do Richard I anymore. I mean, they already were a niche role. You had to know what you were doing. And at this point, bro, the power level's too pushed. Like, I would not spend sculptures on a lot of these commanders until you get to Season of Conquest. The exception, of course, is that some of these commanders are getting revived. And we can talk about that in just a second. I do want to mention that even Richard I, with his niche role, he was in the best Canyon teams, but he's not anymore. That is a very recent development with Liu Che. He's kind of getting cycled out in favor of other commanders. In fact, Liu Che is his replacement. In addition, his instant proc slow is really cool. I've used that in the past on his Awakening, to his expertise, to slow rallies. And so when an enemy's multi-rallying you, you slow the tank rally, and then you make the DPS rallies tank, and then they have to cancel. It's a very good way to stall. He does cool stuff, but, like, I think the window is just completely come and gone for either of those commanders in pretty much, I don't want to say any circumstance, but as a free-to-play low spend, probably any circumstance. In addition, hey, context changing with early game commanders, how about Tommy? I would bump Tommy way up in interest level as a Herman Prime Poison synergy. I think that's going to be freaking sweet, man. I think it's going to be really good. Do I think it's going to win all the duels? No. Do I think it's there to win duels? No. I think it's there to amplify the strength of your team. That's something more that I think players that are going for 6 or 7 marches, however, are going to be thinking about. So we'll leave that no further than there. The other thing we need to do is, okay, if Ashurbanipal is Nebu 2.0, what happens to Nebu 1.0? Well, if we look at the number of archers we have on this list, Zhuge Liang, Herman Prime, Ashurbanipal, technically Isong is kind of up there as being really, really good. We've got Henry, who's really good. I mean, we've got Boudica Prime. We've got so many good archers here. I feel like Nebu 2.0, I like really hate to do this, but like I think we've entered the just no category for investing in Nebu. Now, look, I just used him in KVK. He's great. Don't get me wrong. But compared to your other options, man, I don't think he's where it's at. Not for putting sculptures today, right? Like if a new player is looking at this list and this is the shopping list for where do I put sculptures? Not today, man. You invest in Ashurbanipal and like hope that you're on offense, not defense, because when you're on territory, you literally lose your defense and your march speed, which sucks. But I mean, it's 1,000 extra damage factor on the active skill, right? Plus, I mean, we haven't even talked about Ashurbanipal's expertise if that's the thing you're going to go for. So I do think, however, there's something we need to talk about, and maybe I will change Ashurbanipal's designation here, right? Is I can't decide between these two. Gorgo, you can at least like get the double effect of being good for your city defense, right? Or you could at some point, free to play low spend shouldn't do this, but like you can garrison with her. She's like really versatile. Whereas like, hey, look, Ashurbanipal, I mean, you could rally with him. I guess you could make an argument that you could rally with him just the same that you could garrison with Gorgo. But I feel like these two for open field are maybe for free to play low spend, maybe a little sus, but it all depends on how many marches you're making of those troop types, all right? The final thing I want to talk about, it's new since the last time I made this video, is the equipment update. I said in the past, hey, caution on investing in leadership commanders. We don't know how they're going to be impacted with the new, update to equipment. Now we have iconic tiers, and good news, bad news. All the same equipment that was meta before is still the meta. So good news is you've invested in stuff and that's still best in slot if you've picked the right things. Bad news is you got a lot more patterns to chase down. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of good news if you like having a chase. But on the topic of Trajan and leadership, I feel like for free to play low spend, that's really not where it's at right now. And the other reason that's not where it's at is I just can't recommend you make an open field investment in a commander that we don't know if we're going to get more open field leadership commanders, right? Like I feel like we're overdue. I could be misremembering, but only once we get another good open field leadership commander, if we ever get one, will I then point back to leadership and be like, all right, I see you. This is a thing we can actually recommend, all right? All in all, I think there's a really obvious trend that you can see at the top of the screen here, which is that I do like that the developers are making the Mightiest Governor commander more focused on rally garrison, and the fielder more, accessible via the wheel, right? That is good. But also I'll point out that like the field commander and the rally garrison all are looking really good for field. So what I'm trying to say is like new commanders are pushing out old commanders, and depending on your speed of sculpture gain, you should be looking to basically max the new wheel commander every time a wheel commander comes up if you can, and to ignore the other commander because they're, for fielding, a tier below in power level, in my opinion. So I think, like if you can max 4 commanders a year with managing your gems and your spend, that's probably a good place to be. And if you do more than that because you rally your garrison, okay. I will say for rally and garrison leads with the new iconic tier equipment system, you are locked in. I mean, you are squarely locked in for at least a year to doing just one troop type. So like, unless you are there's no hoarder who's hoarded enough to actually be able to do multiple troop types at the actual min-max. So like, no, you got to pick one troop type. So keep that in mind as you're investing your sculptures here in commanders that are good for field and rally, or field and garrison. Like, I don't know. Do I go for an archer rally commander? I don't know when I'll be able to rally archers. Probably not for a really long time. If you enjoyed the vid, throw a like on here. Consider subscribing. I'm actually really hyped for Herman Prime. And if you want to check out the sponsor of today's video, please do be sure to use the link that's in the description. You can check out the Ants Underground Kingdom on the Huawei App Gallery. Thank you again, Huawei App Gallery, for sponsoring today's video. Again, using my link makes sure that I get credit for your having seen it from this video. So thank you for doing that. And until next time, you have fun smashing the kingdom.